And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is Brewing with Underwhelming Commanders, episode 25. And back to the normal format this time. If you guys haven't checked out the last video I did for this series, I basically just did 12 Underwhelming Commander decks that I had just thrown together myself, made up of the second and third place commanders that I normally don't build decks with, but a lot of times I will become interested in those commanders and want to build the decks for myself, try them out, not really love them. So I just threw out those 12 decks that I had made for you guys to check out if you want. So go check that video out if you want to see any of those decks. But now we're back to the poll. So this is the poll that was in episode 23. And man, did I get a lot of votes. I actually reiterated the whole poll thing. I guess I hadn't talked about that in a while, so a lot of my newer viewers probably didn't even know there was a poll that they could go vote on. Got over 1,200 votes, so lots of people voted on that one. And the third place commander this time was Starke of Wrath. 1 red, human rogue 2/2. Tap, destroy target artifact or creature. That permanence controller gains control of Starke of Wrath. Very interesting, unique ability. So first of all, I'll just say it is a rogue, right? They have updated that creature type there. So red, rogue, not bad. There are quite a few rogues in red if you want to go that route. Like I say all the time, when you're building with an Underwhelming commander, you always want to check out that creature type to see if you can get some support. But I think the best way to go with Starke of Wrath is, of course, to play around with that ability. That's actually a really good ability, right? Destroy an artifact or a creature just by tapping your commander. But of course, then you have to donate it to that player. I suppose one fringe route you could go here is I have, say, a Solemn Simulacrum. I can destroy my own sad robot, draw a card off of it if I want to. And of course, I'm the permanence controller, so I will retain control of my Starke of Wrath. I don't know how much there is to work with there. I think the best option here is to obviously use this on our opponents, but then we got to get it back. So first things first, we got to throw Humble Defector in the deck. 1 in a red, also human rogue, which is interesting. 2/1, tap, draw 2 cards. Target opponent gains control of Humble Defector. Activate only during your turn. So very similar ability to our commander. And because it is a very similar ability, we can be doing similar things with it, obviously, right? And this was in my original 10 deck ideas video, geez, almost a year ago now, where I talked about, drawing 2 cards, destroying an artifact or creature. Both of those are great abilities. You could build an entire deck around these 2 cards if Starke of Wrath wasn't your commander, right? Because then we can have access to more cards that we can get them back with. So if you wanted to throw these 2 cards in the 99 and make, like, say, a Naya deck, there's more support there for gaining control of your creatures back. I would also probably throw Imperial Recruiter in the deck just to go get Humble Defector because it works here so well. Of course, you also want to throw Thousand Year Elixir and Mage Right Stone in there as well. We can activate our commander's ability, and then in response, untap it, activate it again. And again, that's why Humble Defector works so great in this deck, because a lot of the things we're doing with our commander work with Humble Defector as well. I also think I like Diochan Artful Beauty in this deck because, it's got that tap ability, and it's also very political, right? If you want to go a very political route with this, which you definitely could, right? Diochan also works here. You tap to destroy target creature of your choice, then destroy target creature of an opponent's choice. Activate only during your turn before attackers are declared. So obviously Diochan works great in a political theme. Humble Defector works great in a political theme. And Starke of Wrath also works great in a political theme. So you could go that theme as well. At the end of the day, though, I really want to just use my commander and then gain control of it again. So Homeward Path is the best way to do this. Tap, each player gains control of all creatures they own. So you can obviously use your commander or your Humble Defector and then immediately tap your Homeward Path, gain control of it again. So it's all upside for you. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of ways to get it in mono red. Expedition map would be the only way. So a little bit of luck of draw there. I also would play cards like maybe Mangara's Tome or Planar Portal. I have a colorless tutor video, right? And this is why I make videos like that, so that if you're stuck in mono red and you have to get very specific cards, there's some options for you. So if you want some colorless tutors, you can check out that video to add into this deck. Other cards that work here, Brand, obviously, 1 red mana instant, gain control of all permanents you own, and has cycling. Probably not going to cycle this because it is a very important card in the deck. Probably we want to use our Humble Defector and our Starke of Wrath both before we use this because it is only a one-shot. Telemtor's Edict will also work here. This is a card I've mentioned on my 10 cards video, which really doesn't seem like much, but it does do a lot. Just 1 red mana instant, exile target permanent permanent you own or control. Draw a card at the beginning of next turn's upkeep. So you get that cantrip effect, so it's never going to be a dead draw. And then you're exiling a permanent you own or control. So this is a great card if you want to steal your opponent's stuff, and then you can exile it, get rid of their thing, and you get to draw a card. Someone steals our commander, we can exile it because we own it, even though we don't control it, put it back in the command zone. We can do this, of course, with Starke of Wrath as well. Once we donate it to an opponent, we can then pay 1 rad mana, exile it, and of course, we'll put it back in the command zone so we can cast it again. Chaos Warp will also work here, right? The owner of target permanent shuffles it into their library, so we can use our Starke of Wrath and then Chaos Warp it. Maybe we'll get lucky, get something off the top. I mean, you're going to put Chaos Warp in a mono red deck no matter what anyway. Sanctum of Eternity also works here because, again, you pay 2 mana and tap to return target commander you own from the battlefield to your hand. Activate only during your turn. So again, we can use our Starke of Wrath, donate it to an opponent, and then bounce it back to our hand because we own it. We don't have to control it. You can also use cards like Despotic Scepter and Telgiad Stylus that will get rid of stuff that you own. And if you're doing that route, I like Avarice Totem here as well. 1 mana, artifact, pay 5, exchange control of Avarice Totem, and target non-land permanent. So you could do a little bit of an exchange theme here. You can't do a ton, but if you're putting all those other things in the deck, now we can use this as well, right? We can just find an opponent that doesn't have 5 mana untapped, take their best thing, give them our Avarice Totem, and then we can tuck it on the bottom of our library with our Telgiad Stylus or something like that. Gauntlets of Chaos is the only other way in mono red to do this as well. Pay 5 and sacrifice Gauntlets of Chaos, exchange control of target artifact, creature, or land you control, and target permanent an opponent controls that shares one of those types with it. So this is another way we can do some exchange theme. That's probably part of the theme that I would do in this deck. And what's the win con here? You know, I honestly don't think that the win con is going to be involved with your commander. This is one of those decks, sort of like Garth One-Eye. I know it's a weird comparison, Starke of Wrath and Garth One-Eye, but with Garth One-Eye, I look at that and I go, okay, that's a 5-color commander that I want to do some sort of 5-color good stuff deck or some 5-color theme, and I don't really care what my commander is. I really like Garth One-Eye because it's a commander that is removal, card draw. It gives you options. If you get stuck, your commander is an answer for things. Starke of Wrath is the same way. The cards that I mentioned is only going to be about 20% of your deck, right? So if I'm building a Starke of Wrath deck, I have a mono red theme in mind. Again, maybe you could go with mono red rogues or something, but I have a mono red theme that I want to build. I pick Starke of Wrath as my commander because it's removal in the command zone, which is always good. Being able to destroy an artifact or creature is always going to be a great option in a commander game. And then the cards I mentioned, you could put like half a dozen or even a dozen cards in your deck to assist with what your commander's doing. And then the rest of the deck is going to be whatever else that other theme is. That's how I would probably go about it. But moving on to our number 2 commander this week is Orcus, Prince of Undeath. X2, a black and a red demon 5/3. Flying and trample. When Orcus, Prince of Undeath enters the battlefield, choose 1. Each other creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. You lose X life, or return up to X target creature cards with total mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. They gain haste until end of turn. So the one thing that really kind of bugs me about this commander is where are the +1/+1 counters? I think this commander would be a lot better if it entered the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. I don't know. It is very underwhelming for sure because what you're doing, you need so much mana to make it good. And as I talked about when I did the spoiler video for this, quite a while ago now, I see this as a ritual commander. Black and red both do rituals really, really well, right? And you want that big boost of mana for when you cast your commander. So whichever one of these you choose, you're going to get a large X out of it, right? So of course, Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual, Mana Geyser, of course, is a fantastic one in red. You could also do Songs of the Damned. Another one I talked about on my 10 cards video, just 1 black mana instant and add a black for each creature card in your graveyard, which you probably will have quite a few. Spoils of Evil, another personal favorite of mine, 2 and a black instant for each artifact or creature card in target opponent's graveyard. Add a colorless and you gain 1 life. So that's a pretty good ritual effect as well. That'll work great with our commander. We also want to be reusing that ability, right? We don't want to just cast our commander, get that big X, and then our commander just sits there for a while. So Erratic Portal and Sanctum of Eternity are great colorless ways ways, of course, to get your commander back in your hand. Also just good cards, but it was a great way to get our commander back into our hand so we can reuse that ability. And then because our commander is both wiping the board and recurring creatures, as much as you can, I think you want creatures that are having ETB and or dice triggers. So like a sad robot, again, of course, is going to be great here because it has that ETB where you get a land. So if we get it out of our graveyard, we get the land. And then if we do the board wipe, we get to draw cards. So we're getting value either way. That's kind of where I see this the best way to go. I mean, you're returning X target creature cards with total mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So you're going to have X's 4 just to get a sad robot out of the graveyard, which is 8 mana total. That's a lot. So doesn't really seem worth it. Although I would definitely throw it in the deck. I would, as much as you can, try to find really cheap creatures that give you similar value. So Impulsive Pilfer is a great one. Serrated Scorpion, right? Both 1 mana creatures that we can have die. Maybe we can even sacrifice them. You can have a little bit of a sacrifice theme here. We get something out of it when they die, right? Impulsive Pilfer will give us a treasure token. Serrated Scorpion deals 2 damage to each opponent and we gain 2 life. And then because they're only 1 mana, it's really easy to get them back out of our graveyard, right? I want to get like 2 or 3 or 4 creatures out of our graveyard at a time. Perilous Mirror, when it dies, deals 2 damage to any target. Vexing Devil, I think, is a pretty decent one here. Just a 1 mana creature, and it's a 4/3. When it enters the battlefield, any opponent may have it deal 4 damage to them. If a player does sacrifice it, I don't think anyone's going to. I think that nobody's going to take the 4 damage, so you're just going to get a 4/3 for 1 mana. I think that's pretty good. Obviously, Dockside Extortionist will be great here if you can afford one. It's a 2 mana creature, right? This is what we want. We want low mana value creatures that are going to give us lots of value that we can sort of recur, get out of the graveyard over and over again. Virus Beetle's a good one that just came out in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. Elderfang Disciple as well is going to make each opponent discard a card. And how about Azmoran Namardakadastandakaldakar? I'm almost there. Azmoran has a mana value of 0. Now, again, the other drawback with our commander is if we pay 0, you return up to 0 target creature cards with total mana value X or less from your graveyard. So, I mean, either way you slice it, it's not going to be great. The reason I like Azmoran in this deck, though, is because you go get that cookbook, and the cookbook is discarding cards, and you are maybe in a little bit of discard theme here, so I thought that would actually be an interesting fit. It's also good value, right? You're getting a 2-for-1. The ability on our commander, though, is very limiting, right? Because of it is X target creature cards with total mana value X. So I think probably the best way to go here is to have as many 1-drops as you can. Obviously, cards like maybe Black Market or Warstorm Surge are going to work great here because we're going to have lots of creatures dying, whether it be ours or our opponents, and we're going to have lots of creatures probably entering the battlefield all at once. So Warstorm Surge, cards like that are going to work great as well. And I thought Grevin Predator Captain could also be a great fit here, right? 3 black and a red human warrior, 5/5 with menace. Grevin Predator Captain gets +X+0, where X is the amount of life you've lost this turn. And our commander is losing us life, right? I was trying to find a way at least to take advantage of that. If we lose, like, say, 5 life, now our Grevin is going to get +5/+0. I mean, not bad. I mean, it is an advantage to that ability that we are using anyway. Really underwhelming commander for sure. It's a tough one. Like I said, I think probably the best route to go is put a bunch of rituals in the deck and put as much 1 mana creatures in the deck as you can that have dies and or ETB triggers. That way you can get maximum value out of it. But coming in at number 1 this week, and once again, a mono white commander won by an absolute country mile. Kataki War's Wage, 1 and a white Spirit. 2/1. All artifacts have, at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice this artifact unless you pay 1. So it is a tabernacle for artifacts. And I mean, this is one of those commanders that your opponents are probably not going to love if they see it in the command zone. This is like the 3rd or 4th mono white sort of stacksy taxi commander that I've had win a poll on Underwhelming Commander. So people want me to build this deck, so I'm going to build it. Be warned, as soon as your opponents see Kataki War's Wage in the command zone, they're not going to love it, and you might be a target right out of the gate, because even the mana rocks, right? Your opponent plays their first turn Soul Ring, and then you play your Kataki's War's Wage. Now their Soul Ring, they have to tap it on their upkeep in order to keep it around, right? Kataki basically hoses all mana rocks because your mana rocks basically have to tap just to keep themselves in play. It's not the funnest commander in the world to play against, and obviously works really good against those treasure tokens, all those artifact tokens that have been blowing up in the format lately. No one's going to pay the mana to keep a treasure token around, right? So it works great there as well. Again, just in general, you could have Kataki as your commander if you want to build a mono-white theme. Any mono-white theme, maybe mono-white spirits you could do, because your commander is a spirit, and just having Kataki in your command zone can be really, really helpful. However, I want to build a deck here that actually is going to take advantage of our commander's ability. I try to do that as much as I can in this series, and of course, our artifacts are going to cost 1 as well, or we have to sacrifice them on our upkeep. So I thought, why not throw some artifacts in here that we want to sacrifice, right? So the Wellsprings are great. Mycosynth Wellspring and Ichor Wellspring, they ETB. We get a draw card or a land, and then on our upkeep, we just won't pay the 1. They'll go to the graveyard and we'll get that effect again. Spine of Ishsa and Ugin's Nexus, also great here. Spine of Ishsa will destroy a permanent, and then when we sacrifice it, it'll go back to our hand. Ugin's Nexus, if a player would begin an extra turn, that player skips that turn instead. Also, if Ugin's Nexus we put in the graveyard from the battlefield instead, exile it and take an extra turn after this one. So the great part about this here is we can pay the 1, right? We don't have to sacrifice it. We can play Ugin's Nexus if we're up against a guy who's actually taking extra turns. We'll just pay the 1 for our Ugin's Nexus and leave it in play. We can just pay the 1 until maybe we'll want to take that extra turn, right? We see our moment, we want to take the extra turn, so now we let the Ugin's Nexus die and we get an extra turn. We don't have to sacrifice our artifacts right away. We can actually leave them in play for a while until we actually want to use that effect that puts them into the graveyard. Golden Guardian, I think, is a great fit here as well. 4 mana artifact creature golem, 4/4, has defender, pay 2. Golden Guardian fights another target creature you control. When Golden Guardian dies this turn, return it to the battlefield transformed under your control. So again, it's another thing we want to die. So what we do is on our upkeep, in response to the upkeep trigger, we're going to fight another creature, right? Just a 1/1, whatever we got lying around. I suppose we could fight our commander if we really wanted to. Then after we've activated that ability, we again forego paying the upkeep. Our Golden Guardian will die. It'll go to the graveyard and then come back transformed, and it becomes Goldforge Garrison, a land that taps to add 2 mana of any color, so that's pretty good. And also we can pay 4 and tap, create a 4/4 colorless artifact creature token. So if you're going to start cranking out those colorless artifact creature tokens, maybe it is a good idea to kill our commander. Again, we're in control here, right? We can get our commander off the board because there is a fair amount of artifacts in this deck if it is really hampering us. If we flip our Goldforge Garrison and we want to start cranking out those golem tokens, we can actually fight our commander to get it off the board, so we're not going to be held back by it, right? We can play our commander when it's convenient for us. Only costs 2 mana, so if it dies a couple times, not a big deal. Glinthawk is another one that'll work great here. 1 mana, bird, 2/2 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you return an artifact you control to owner's hand. So this is a good way to get an artifact off the table, right? If we have an artifact that we don't want to sacrifice, or an artifact that is sort of hurting us, there is a little bit of non-bows, I guess, going on in this deck because we're hating on artifacts, but also we're using a lot of artifacts. So this can be a little bit of a difficult deck to navigate. Glinthawk is a great way to get one of those artifacts off the table that you don't want to be paying for. I threw Ashnod's Transmogrant in this deck. 1 mana artifact. Tap and sacrifice Ashnod's Transmogrant. Put a +1/+1 counter on target non-artifact creature. That creature becomes an artifact in addition to its other types. So this is a way that we can turn an opponent's creature into an artifact creature permanently, so that now they have to pay an upkeep for it. We are putting a +1/+1 counter on it, right? This isn't meant to be used on ourselves. It's meant to be used on our opponents. And I know people will say, hey, where's Liquid Metal Torque in here? I do not have Liquid Metal Torque in here because that actually does not work here as much as I would like it to. You can respond at the beginning of upkeep triggers, but you can't do anything before, okay? When a turn starts, at the beginning of upkeep triggers automatically go on the stack right away. That's the first thing that happens on your turn because you can't do anything during the untap step, right? You can't activate abilities, you can't do anything. So on a person's turn, right away, immediately, all the artifacts that they control will trigger and put those Kataki War's Wage upkeep triggers on the stack, and you have no ability to respond with a Liquid Metal Torque. You can turn an opponent's creature into into an artifact after, but the at the beginning part has already happened. So it's not going to do anything. It's not going to make them pay that upkeep. So that does not work here. And in fact, doesn't work in the deck at all, really. Normally I would put Liquid Metal Torque in a mono white deck, but again, didn't put any mana rocks in here because mana rocks with Kataki just end up paying for themselves. They're not really that good. So it is not in here. However, I did throw in Magnetic Mine and Scrap Heap. And Magnetic Mine can be a tricky one, obviously. 4-mana artifact. Whenever another artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, Magnetic Mine deals 2 damage to that artifact's controller. So this works on us too. This is one of those ones where like, oh man, this could be a little bit tough to navigate. It is going to be sort of a win con for us, making our opponents sack their artifacts. Again, especially with like treasure tokens and stuff, this works extra good. Scrap Heap is one way that we can get around it a little bit. That's a 3-mana artifact. Whenever an artifact or enchantment is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you gain 1 life. So for our artifacts to be going to the graveyard, we'll take 2 damage, but we'll gain 1 life. So it's not nearly as bad. We'll get a little bit more out of it. Again, you got to be careful with this. It's not the easiest deck in the world to pilot. I also got Thran Turbine in here, and people are probably wondering, why the heck is he throwing so many artifacts in this deck? I'm going with a little bit of a French theme here. I'm going with a Kataki War's Wage sort of artifact theme. I know it seems odd, but Thran Turbine I like because a 1-mana artifact, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you add 2 colorless mana, and you can't spend this mana to cast spells, but you can spend it to pay upkeeps. So what's going to happen with Thran Turbine is it's going to give us 2 colorless mana. We're going to use 1 to pay for Thran Turbine's upkeep, and we're going to use the other 1 to pay for another artifact's upkeep. So what Thran Turbine does is it just pays the upkeep for one of our other artifacts every turn. Just free mana, so why not throw it in there? We are doing a little bit of a Staxy or Taxi, I would say more Taxi theme. I don't consider Kataki to be a Stax commander. This is a tax, right? You have to pay an extra 1. That's by definition a tax. So let's throw in some more cards like that. I mean, we might as well take advantage of it. Leon and Arbiter, right? Players can't search libraries unless they pay 2. Spell Tithe Enforcer. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player sacrifices a permanent unless they pay 1. So again, this is a taxes theme where our opponents are already going to be hampered down on mana because they have to pay for their artifacts. Let's hamper them down a little more. Thalia Heretic Cathar is going to make their non-basic lands and creatures enter the battlefield tapped. So again, when their lands are entering the battlefield tapped, it's going to be harder to pay costs for stuff. And World Queller, one of my personal favorites, 3 white Avatar 4/4. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may choose a card type. If you do, each player sacrifices a permanent of that type. I always try to find room for this in a white deck. I just think it's a phenomenal card. At the beginning of your upkeep, you're going to choose a card type. So first of all, you can choose artifact. If you have any of your artifacts around that you're planning on sacrificing anyway, like one of your Wellsprings, we'll just choose that. And then all of our opponents have to sacrifice an artifact as well. So it works great there. But I really love this card because you can just choose a permanent you don't have. You can just say, oh, well, I don't have an enchantment. I'm just going to pick enchantment. All my opponents have to sacrifice an enchantment. Maybe you'll pick a land. You can even pick land here if you want to. And you don't have to pick anything at all. This is a May. You can just forgo picking anything if there's nothing around you want to sacrifice. So great card, and I think it works particularly good here. But of course, everybody wants to know, how are we going to win with this deck? I got a few options. So the first one, and the really mean one, is Mycosynth Lattice. Of course, everyone's familiar with, I'm sure, 6-mana artifact. All permanents are artifacts in addition to their other types. And that's really the only part that matters here. What this is going to do, and of course, we're going to play this on our turn, and then on our opponent's turn, now all of their permanents are artifacts, including their lands. So now they have to pay that 1-mana upkeep for all of their permanents. And of course, their lands are going to pay for their lands, right? Because their lands are artifacts, just like with the mana rock thing, they have to tap all their lands individually to pay for all their lands or sacrifice all their lands, right? I mean, they might actually sacrifice some of their lands to keep some of their non-land permanents around. They'll have some really tough choices to make, obviously, right? Basically, this becomes sort of a board wipe in a way. And again, a little bit of a non-bow. This is going to work on us as well. So you have to be really careful with the timing here. Or on our upkeep, we're going to have to sacrifice everything. Of course, for us, we can sacrifice our Mycosynth Lattice to our Kataki. So again, we are at the advantage here because it's our permanent. Other things that we can do, like I put Ingenuity Engine in the deck. 7-mana artifact, has Cascade, which is good, but pay 1, tap, sacrifice an artifact, return target artifact you control to owner's hand. I think this card's going to be great in the deck because we can both sacrifice an artifact and return an artifact we control to owner's hand. So with our Mycosynth Lattice on our opponent's end step, we can go, okay, well, I can just sacrifice it to my Ingenuity engine and get rid of it so we don't have to pay all that upkeep, or I can return it to my hand. I can sacrifice a different artifact, maybe one of those well springs, return my Mycosynth Lattice to my hand so I don't have to pay any of the upkeeps, and then play it again on my main phase so that my opponents have to do, and you can keep that cycle going and basically keep your opponents locked down because they have to keep tapping their lands again to pay for their lands, right? So you can completely keep your opponents locked down with this combo, I think, as long as you have the artifact to sacrifice. A couple other options. I did put Approach to the Second Sun in the deck. Whenever you're playing this sort of taxi, staxy theme, Approach to the Second Sun is always going to be a great win con. I threw Elish Norn in the deck. Again, fits the, I guess, staxy theme of keeping our opponent's small creatures off the board. Also gives our creatures a huge boost. We can just close out the game, killing our opponents with our creatures if we have an Elish Norn in play. And I also got Luminarch Ascension in the deck. Again, another fantastic finisher if you have a, Pillow Fort or Staxy strategy, because your opponents are just never going to be able to hit you. So that is the deck, right? Again, you could just do damn near anything with Kataki's War's Wage, right? If you just want to hate on your, opponents love to play Dockside Extortionist and Smothering Tithe and all this treasure stuff. Maybe they have a Prosper deck. Maybe they have an Artifact Tribal deck. Kataki War's Wage is fantastic against all of them. It's fantastic against almost every commander deck because everyone plays lots of mana rocks. And again, basically just shuts off mana rocks, right? Because the mana rocks have to tap to pay for themselves typically. So you're not really getting any advantage out of them. I think the deck here I built is pretty interesting. Again, not going to be the funnest deck in the world to play against. Be warned. I would have no problem with it personally. Like if I'm playing against a Kataki deck, I know my opponent's got it. It's in their command zone. I'm not going to play the first turn Sol Ring, right? You can play around this. I know people don't like playing against commanders like this, but just use some strategy. Play around it. Don't play your first turn Mana Crypt or Sol Ring or whatever. Save your mana rocks for later, or have that removal spell ready, right? That always works as well. But I think I put a pretty interesting deck together here. And it's a deck that isn't just a stacks deck. It's actually got some interesting applications to it. So check it out if you want to. Of course, the deck list for this one is in the description below. Feel free to take it and make it your own. Make your own changes to it if you want to as well. Of course, as always, I always encourage people to make their own changes to the decks that I make. You don't have to play it as is. Put in some of the stuff you like and maybe take out some of the stuff you don't like, right? These are just ideas that I come up with, and you guys can make whatever changes you want, of course. And if you like the way I put decks together, I do a deck doctor and I do patron deck techs on my Patreon for my patrons. The link for that is in the description below as well. Feel free to give it a click. It also helps support the channel. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.